Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming back after lunch, and I hope that a conversation about ethics and conduct will liven us up a bit. This panel is focused on legislative codes of conduct to promote integrity in legislatures. Why? Why is this important? Our panelists, I hope, will address some of these questions. As we all know, in many of our countries, the trust in parliaments or legislatures and their members can be quite low. We also know that most countries have been prey to certain scandals of their representatives, and this also erodes some of the trust in the legislative body. So an ethical framework can help in some ways. First, it fights corruption, and some of the previous panelists talked a lot about ensuring that public interest was taken over private gain, and codes of conduct and other mechanisms can work to ensure that. An ethical framework can also, of course, inform citizens and contribute to transparency. Understanding better the conduct of your elected representative might influence how you vote, for example, in the next election. Another thing that I think is often overlooked in talking about ethical codes is there tends to be a lot of focus on the policing side of things and not on the protection side. And code of ethics can protect the institution and also protect the individual, providing clarity and guidance through murky waters of lobbyists and other interests. And of course, it can help professionalize and set standards for the legislative body. And through doing all these things, of course, ultimately builds trust in the institution, builds confidence, and creates a better environment for citizens. In 2006, the Brussels Declaration of OSCE EPA also made the recommendation of rigorous standards, mechanisms for disclosure, and offices for complaints. Of course, we know and we'll hear today about the many different mechanisms and forms that can take, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all in these matters. Some parliaments, of course, have chosen to adapt codes of conduct or codes of ethics, but even within that, there are many variations. Is it internal, self-regulating? Is it an external or semi-autonomous body that enforces? Is it legally binding, or is it purely advisory? And what kind of sanctions are available? Some just believe that the public exposure of a scandal is enough of a deterrent and enough of a sanction. We also have asset declarations, rules about allowances and gifts, and lobbying, of course, which some of the panelists will refer to. And I'd also like to encourage the panel to talk a little bit about the challenges. We here in Georgia have been working on a code of ethics for a couple years, and tomorrow we'll talk about that. Sometimes there are these aspects covered in other laws, so people deem a code of ethics unnecessary because there's other legal mechanisms that already address them. Some fear that a code of ethics can be used as a political tool to punish political opponents. Many, particularly in civil society, have expressed skepticism about having an internal or self-regulatory enforcement body. In many countries, for example, it's seen as, the wolves protecting the hen house, so to speak. And then, of course, there's concerns about infringement on speech in some environments. So there definitely are a lot of challenges, which is why I'm so delighted to have this esteemed panel. We have, first up, the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Tamar Chugashvili, who is not only a member of Parliament and Deputy Speaker and wears many hats within this institution, comes from a human rights and NGO background and has a breadth of experience to bring to the table. So I'd like first to turn it over to Tamar. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Dear guests, welcome to Georgia. Welcome to Georgian Parliament. We are delighted to host the OGP Global Summit this year in Tbilisi. This is our privilege, and hope that you will enjoy your stay for a couple of days in our country. Well, indeed, as Laura mentioned, well, first of all, thank you very much for this kind introduction. And as we are talking about transparency and accountability of the state institutions and parliamentary, parliament specifically, I should start by saying that my very first professional experience actually was being a watchdog on accessing the public information. So very first thing that I have done after the college was working as a monitor, following whether the state institutions disclose the information that they are obliged to disclose. And the Freedom of Information Act was probably one of the first laws that I've learned by heart. And so I'm truly honored to be on the other side of the aisle right now and having the opportunity to contribute to transparency and accountability of the parliament as an institution from this capacity. And I think that indeed many things have been done, but a lot of challenges remain, and I think that we should discuss all of them. And I definitely agree what Laura said, and also other panelists mentioned this morning, that politicians and parliament and political parties face increasing issue of distrust. And this is unfortunately a global trend. This is what we face, that more and more citizens are skeptical about what politicians do and what the contribution of the politicians in development of the countries is. And this is not only in Georgia, this is everywhere. Everywhere I'm meeting my colleagues, everywhere we have discussions, this is what comes up in every discussion. And how can we counter that, and how can we argue against, or how can we prove that politicians are not there for themselves but are there for the actual job that they have been hired for, is to ensure more transparency, more participation, and more accountability of the institutions. And that's why the OGP principles are vitally important, and respecting and following the OGP principles is important. It is not because it's an international trend, it's not because it is liked by international stakeholders, but because we need our citizens to have trust in us and to be sure that we serve them and we do not serve our own interests. And these issues matter indeed. As for the Georgian regulations, as for the practice that we have, there are a number of good issues, good standards that we have, but there are some challenges that we still face. Well, first of all, I should say that we have, I would say, quite a good law on conflict of interests. And that law obliges every single parliamentarian to be, and also we have constitutional regulations on that. None of us have any right to serve on a board of any corporation, to have interests in, be a managing partner in any of the corporations, and while serving in the cabinet, while serving in the parliament at the same time to manage any of the companies. At the same time, there are existing regulations on restrictions on receiving gifts. And this is also prescribed in law, and this is again very regulated in details, how we, what we can accept, what we cannot accept, and these regulations are quite clear. We also have obligations to declare our income, our expenditures, any gifts, income and expenditure of our family members, any gifts that our family members have received throughout the years. And we have this obligation to declare annually, with annual declaration, and the mechanism has proven to be effective in terms of monitoring whether, and there is, and I think the NGO colleagues would agree that in last several years, especially this year, the legislation has proven to be working effectively when talking about the declaration of interest. Of course, there are regulations on transparency of public procurements, and any procurement that happens, any spending of the state budget is transparent and accessible for the society. So again, I think that there are quite solid regulations which gives to our citizens opportunity to be confident that no politicians participate in those. But there are issues that still remain to be done, and I would like to talk more about the Code of Ethics, which was mentioned by Laura. And this Parliament has spent quite some time already to develop this solid Code of Ethics for the members of Parliament. And beyond those regulations, which I already mentioned, which are already fixed in the legislation, which are already working, we need additional regulations. We need restricting ourselves even more and imposing some regulations on ourselves even more to make sure that public trust towards the Parliament as an institution is increasing. And some of the important issues are, which I want to highlight, are which we have in our draft Code of Ethics. Hopefully it will be supported by the members of the Parliament quite soon. Some of the key moments in this Code of Ethics are that every parliamentarian should be responsible, should be obliged to declare the conflict of interest in every vote if such conflict of interest exists. And that should happen every time we are voting for the piece of legislation. We should commit ourselves that there is no any conflict of interest, and if there is any, that should be visible for our population, for our citizens, and that should be declared. There should be even more strict regulations on gifts, on receiving gifts. And according to our draft Code of Ethics, the members of the Parliament are obliged to submit those gifts in the special registry that will be created in the Parliament. According to the same document, the parliamentarians have prohibition. It is prohibited for the parliamentarians to accept gifts from the lobbyists. According to the same OGP commitments, the Parliament is obliged to, will be obliged to create the special registry of the lobbyists, which will be posted on the parliamentary website, and our citizens will be able to follow and see who are the lobbyists who work with the Parliament. Even today, the information about lobbyist companies is presented to the Bureau of the Parliament. There is public, but the register, the special register, will in addition be published on our website. What is the most important is the implementation tool, how we make sure that those commitments that we make are followed. And this implementation mechanism is, in our case, will be a Council of Ethics composed of the parliamentarians, in our case, as we are proposing to the Parliament, co-chaired by the majority and the opposition, which is also very important because composition of these kind of councils cannot follow the exact proportion of the political representation of the political parties. But instead, we believe that this is, and this is also the international standard, that instead these councils should be created in a way that either there is equal representation of opposition and the majority, or there is a majority representation of the parliamentary opposition. And that is important to make sure that no violation of Code of Ethics remains covered. We have, I should say that we unfortunately once failed to adopt this Code of Ethics. There was already one attempt. We are going to the second round quite soon. And the main argument by the colleagues mentioned here was that there is a feeling among the members that in certain areas there is a conflict between the freedom of expression and the regulations proposed by the Code of Ethics. And that a line where the standards of ethical standards stand and where the freedom of expression gives the opportunity to the members of Parliament to express themselves freely is quite blurry. And we are now going through additional consultations to make sure that on one hand members do not have feeling that their right to freely express themselves is anyhow limited, but at the same time make sure that we express ourselves and we deliver our opinions in a way that it is ethical and it is not discriminatory and it does not make certain minorities, for example, feel bad. And this is important. So we are continuing. Of course, these challenges are there. There isn't this discussion and arguments whether freedom of expression and the ethical rules are in conflict, and where the line is. So this is, I would say, this is the key conversation that we have right now. But I'm very optimistic. I think that with the additional efforts, colleagues will get on our side and realize the importance of making sure that public has a trust in ways parliaments operate, the members of parliament operate, and how they communicate about their parliamentary work with the society. So this is the part of the OGP commitments that still remains to be implemented, fulfilled. I think that there are significant achievements, but these are the ones where Georgian Parliament still has additional work to do. And I should just use this opportunity and thank all the stakeholders, all the partner organizations who are extremely supportive, and Laura and others who are extremely supportive in our work. And we appreciate this support, and I think that jointly together we can get to even higher standards on ethics, on accountability and transparency in Georgian Parliament, which hopefully will lead to the increased public trust in a parliament as an institution, which is vitally important. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tamara. I think one thing that's been very interesting about this whole process here in Georgia is even though the Code of Ethics hasn't passed yet, the process in and of itself has been an educational experience and I think has raised awareness. Just having these discussions, working cross parties, working with different civil society organizations and having a conversation about ethics and what it means. And even that process in and of itself, I think, has made a difference. And we hope that it will be passed soon. Thank you so much. Now I would like to turn the floor over to Reinhold Lopatka, did I say that correctly? Who is the chair of EU Affairs in the National Council of Austria. He is a member of parliament. He's also served in 3 different ministries, and I'm very interested to hear a little bit about the Austrian experience, and particularly with issues related to codes of conduct, lobbying, and promoting integrity in the legislature.
Thank you very much for the chance to give you a short overview how we try to improve our system in Austria. I have to mention since 1995 we are a member of the European Union, and we are also a member of the Council of Europe, which is important for Austria because, to give you one example, GRECO, the group of states against corruption, they have a strong influence in their reports. And when do we have an improvement? Yeah, we always changed our system after a scandal. The last scandal we had in 2012, and really we improved our system, and now we regained more trust, which is very important. We have a complex system of regulations concerning the rights and duties of members of parliament. There's a legal binding in Austria, and it is controlled by the parliament itself, by the opposition, by a minority. And this minority can also start with an inquiry committee, or they have a lot of different possibilities if one of the politicians fail. So I think this is important. It's a right of the minority. The second thing in our system is that our system is very transparent. For example, when you Google my name and you go on to the website of the Austrian Parliament, you will find, I Googled before, speaking of me, 1,536 different informations. You have a lot of buttons there. For example, one button is transparency. There you can find how much money I earned in 2015, 2016, and what I earned in 2017. You will see next year in June. So 1 year later, always you have to publish it. If you go to another link, you will find all my positions, not only the positions I am paid for, also positions which are not paid. And you find all the activities of a politician. We have a strict system of incompatible positions, and in Austria we maybe we have one problem. All these regulations are not in one law, not in one code of conduct. We have different laws, and when you start as a politician, you have 1 month time, and within 1 month you have to give all your informations concerning incompatibility and about your functions and about your income, and you have to sign a paper that you are informed about everything. And if someone forget, it happened, then, as I mentioned before, this system of the internal control starts, and a minority has the chance, and then if you made a big mistake, you will not be re-elected. So it's not a punishment by court, it is punishment by the voters, public opinion. And of course, politicians are not allowed to accept any lobby order. We have different groups of lobbyists in Austria. Some of them are supported by the government. We have a so-called system of social partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, a Chamber for Labor, a Chamber for the Farmers, and they are involved in all the legal processes. They have certain rights. And of course, we have a huge number in Austria of NGOs. They are involved by law. They have the right to be involved in each legal process. What I want to mention is, and it was already mentioned before, every leading position in a stock company, in a foundation or in a saving bank, you have to publish an employment for a regional authority or municipality. So everything is public. And I told you, you have also to mention every activity for which you receive money. You get money. For example, you give a speech and you get 100 euros. If you don't publish it, then you get a problem. So every compensation or every money which is more than the compensation of your real costs has to be published. And as I mentioned before, every leading voluntary activity is also public. And beside your position as an MP, and everyone knows how much a member of parliament earns, you have to publish your gross monthly income in addition to the income as a member of parliament. So this system is really very transparent. You find it on the website, which is published by the parliament for each of the 183 parliamentarians. And as I mentioned, each politician is responsible for his homepage, for the correctness and completeness. And if you don't report everything or you make a mistake, then we have a committee which is only, they have the surveillance and which is doing only this thing to look what the parliamentarians are doing. And one from the opposition chairs this committee, as I mentioned before. It's called the Incompatibility Committee. And it reports every year, and they have between 3 and 5 times a year their meetings. And when there's a change, a new parliamentarian is coming, then he has to report within 1 month everything. What I want to mention, and maybe then I finish for the introduction, There are two other things which should be mentioned, as I think. One is we have 5 parties now in our parliament. We had already more. And there's also within the parties a competition, which party has more transparency. And so each party has also a code of conduct, because they know it. To be re-elected, to gain votes, you have to say, yeah, everything is transparent, and we are the best, we are very clean, and you know all this. So I think it's good that also the parties have their code of conduct. They are different. And the last thing, I think, which is really a best practice we have in Austria, it was started by a former president of our National Council. It is a so-called democracy workshop. All the 183 parliamentarians are involved in this work. What does it mean? Between 5,000 and 10,000 youngsters each year came in our parliament, like we are sitting here, then the youngsters are sitting there. They are working there one day long, and 2 or 3 hours they work together with parliamentarians. And always we also discuss with them these issues: transparency, accountability, and also the income, how much money should be paid for a politician, what is correct, what is too much, how can we involve all the different groups of our society to give everyone the chance to become a member of parliament. And this democracy workshop with the youngsters is very important. And we were the first country also in Europe where young people are allowed to vote with 16 years. You know, so with 16 years you are allowed to vote in Austria. And we have a very young parliament. Our chancellor is 31 years old. And we have many ministers who are in their 30s, and in my party we have 62 members now in parliament. 10 are younger than 30. And I think it has also to do with this democracy workshop. So many young people are involved in this process. Thank you.
That's my kind of partisan competition, competing for internal codes of conduct. That's brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing those experiences. I would like to now introduce Paulina Nunes, who is the president of the Bicameral Group on Transparency in the Chilean Congress. She is a member of parliament, and she is also the vice president of her own political party. And Paulina, thank you.
Muchas gracias. Quiero partir brevemente porque después de haber volado casi 20 horas para llegar acá, quiero darle las gracias a la delegación de Chile que hoy me acompaña, al vicepresidente del Grupo Bicameral de Transparencia, el senador Alfonso Durresti, al senador Juan Antonio Colomas, al diputado Alejandro Santana, al diputado Tucapel Jiménez, a Rocío Noriega y a Luis Rojas. Es una importante delegación que se hace presente nuevamente en estos encuentros de UGP, así que también muchas gracias a ustedes desde Georgia por recibirnos. Y bueno, el título que nos convoca, Transparencia, Responsabilidad Parlamentaria. Quiero partir diciendo que en Chile, tanto desde el Congreso Nacional como desde el Gobierno, desde el Ejecutivo, hemos venido trabajando desde el año 2009 en mayor transparencia y acceso a la información pública. Y desde el año 2012, con más fuerza, con mayor energía, sumando los principios de Parlamento abierto, integridad, rendición de cuentas y, por supuesto, mayor participación ciudadana. Y aquí me detengo brevemente. Hoy no existen motivos para no abrir la puerta de nuestros parlamentos. La transparencia es la mayor herramienta para derrotar la corrupción y es por eso que es una responsabilidad nuestra trabajar en ello. También creo que es importante entender que no pueden haber líderes poco éticos ni pueden haber instituciones poco probas, porque cuando existen líderes poco éticos o instituciones poco probas, lo que estamos haciendo es aumentando la tolerancia para la corrupción. Y cuando existe corrupción, no solo en las instituciones o en algunos líderes, lamentablemente es el contexto, es decir, nuestras sociedades, nuestros países los que se transforman en países corruptos. Gracias. Vamos ahí. Y por eso creo que es importante entender que tenemos que recuperar la confianza. Y para recuperar la confianza, no solo tenemos que generar códigos de ética, manuales de un mejor comportamiento, reformas a nuestras leyes que regulan los congresos nacionales, sino que tiene que haber un sistema de integridad. Este sistema de integridad tiene que hacer efectiva el cumplimiento de estas normas, de estas leyes. Y para recuperar la confianza no lo hacemos porque queramos subir un par de puntos en las encuestas, que muchas veces tampoco reflejan lo que nosotros creemos que está ocurriendo, sino que porque si tenemos la ciudadanía, a las personas, confiando en las instituciones, tenemos entonces gobiernos y parlamentos más eficientes, más efectivos. Me explico. Un ciudadano que confía en su gobierno, un ciudadano que confía en su parlamento, es un ciudadano entonces que cumple de mejor manera las leyes, que paga sus impuestos, que nos permite tener efectividad en la planificación de las políticas públicas. Y con ciudadanos confiando en sus instituciones, con líderes éticos y con instituciones probas, entonces todos ganamos. También creo que es importante entender que no debemos confundir la concentración del poder con el principio de mayoría, un fundamento clave en nuestras democracias, porque todo lo que hemos dicho hoy día y todos los esfuerzos que hemos puesto en poder tener códigos de ética, ley de lobby, una declaración de intereses y patrimonio, no va a servir de nada si no hay un contrapeso en nuestras instituciones. Y aquellos que defendimos la democracia y creemos en ese principio de mayoría, tenemos que entender que cada una de estas comisiones, por ejemplo, tiene que estar conformada transversalmente. Y, obviamente, en aquellos congresos como el nuestro, que es bicameral, compuesto también por senadores y diputados. Por eso me voy a centrar en lo que tenemos hoy en Chile. Sé que en algunos encuentros ya lo han escuchado, y aquí quiero agradecer públicamente al ex senador Hernán Larraín y al ex diputado Patricio Vallespín, que desde hace ya mucho tiempo no solamente alzaron desde Chile estos planes de acción o estas medidas y ejecución de los principios de Parlamento abierto, sino que también han firmado convenios de colaboración con otros países, que es lo que nosotros pretendemos hacer de aquí en adelante. Pero me detengo en lo que tenemos en Chile. Reglamentos tanto de la Cámara de Diputados como del Senado, declaración de intereses y de patrimonio, Comisión de Ética y de Transparencia con su respectivo reglamento, ley de lobby y el grupo bicameral, que es el que ha empujado conjuntamente tanto a la Cámara como al Senado la ejecución de estos instrumentos. Brevemente me voy a referir a dos de ellos, a la ley de lobby y al grupo bicameral. La ley de lobby no fue fácil aprobarla en Chile. Todo lo que ya he nombrado está aprobado y está ejecutándose en Chile. Pero me detengo en esta ley de lobby porque ocurrió algo llamativo para poder explicarlo. En el año 2003 se ingresó el primer proyecto desde el Ejecutivo. Y las primeras barreras, por supuesto, que vinieron de aquellos actores activos, de los lobistas, para poder definir qué se entendía por lobby y quiénes iban a ser esos sujetos activos. Avanzando en ese debate, el año 2012, en el primer gobierno del presidente Sebastián Piñera, se logró modificar el eje y se terminó regulando el sujeto pasivo, es decir, a la autoridad. Y desde ese punto de vista se logró aprobar esta ley de lobby, que ha tenido grandes avances, que por supuesto aún le falta mucho por concretar para ser perfecta, pero que estos avances los destacamos porque, por ejemplo, hoy tenemos la obligación, los parlamentarios, de recibir o de responder, mejor dicho, ante cualquier sujeto que venga a solicitar una gestión o una reunión con nosotros. Y es más, si no los recibimos, también tenemos que públicamente indicar cuál es el motivo por el que no los recibimos. Y para ello, además, hay un plazo. Y hay funcionarios del Congreso que nos van recordando qué organizaciones o qué lobistas son los que quieren reunirse con nosotros. Más allá de los regalos, que también lo tenemos regulado, con un monto, por supuesto, me gustaría destacar, insisto, lo que nos permitió esta ley de lobby, que por lo demás pueden ver ahí en la presentación, solo hay 15 en todo el mundo, y con más fuerza el 2010, antes de eso 1 o 2 iniciativas por año. Como les decía, nos falta por avanzar, pero también ya tiene importantes medidas que se están cumpliendo. Por ejemplo, ¿qué creemos nosotros que aún falta por mejorar? Y eso también hay que decirlo, porque es fácil decir todo lo que hemos hecho, pero cuesta muchas veces decir lo que aún falta como para poder entre todos mejorarlo. Y bueno, ¿qué falta, por ejemplo? Que no exista inhabilidad post-empleo en el caso de los parlamentarios. Eso hoy día lo estamos discutiendo en el Congreso, en el Senado, en la Comisión de Constitución, en una modificación que va a tener nuestra ley orgánica respecto a que, terminado el cargo en el Parlamento, no puedas ejercer cargos que pueda tener una inhabilidad respecto al cargo que ya ejerciste. En el caso del grupo bicameral, que es el que nos acompaña y lo que yo les mencionaba recién, este es un grupo que está formado por senadores y diputados y es un grupo además que tiene la labor de promover entre ambas cámaras los planes de acción y, por supuesto, toda medida en materia de probidad, de transparencia, de integridad, de ética, de rendición de cuentas, etc. Y aquí me quiero detener en dos iniciativas que además han sido compartidas con otros países. El Congreso virtual, para que, por supuesto, tengamos esta puerta abierta, esta ventana abierta y la mayor transparencia y de fácil acceso, claridad, para que cualquier persona pueda consultar respecto de ello. Y también estamos trabajando en el reglamento de participación ciudadana, de la mano con la ley de lobby. Esto es muy importante destacarlo porque no podemos hablar de transparencia, códigos de ética, ley de lobby, si no entendemos que hoy es imposible cerrarle la puerta a la participación ciudadana. La participación ciudadana es clave en cada uno de estos procesos y es por eso que no queremos en Chile una participación ciudadana informal o no regulada. Queremos tener un reglamento que hemos estado trabajando de la mano con más de 36 organizaciones en Chile y que el próximo lunes en Chile vamos a realizar mesas de trabajo con ellos para incluirlos y que quede claro tanto para ellos como para nosotros qué es lo que pueden hacer. Y para finalizar, en materia de elecciones, ¿cierto? ¿Dónde vamos? Creo que toda crisis de corrupción trae una oportunidad. Y la oportunidad es precisamente mejorar en materia legislativa e instrumentos lo que hoy nos regula para poder avanzar en mayor ética, transparencia y probidad. Pero esa oportunidad también no nos puede llevar a legislar en caliente, a legislar apresurado, porque una mala legislación en materia de probidad y transparencia a veces le facilita la vida al poco ético y al poco probo. Asumir compromisos de nuestros planes de acción en Chile. Ya estamos finalizando el segundo plan de acción, en agosto vamos a iniciar el tercero, dentro de esto las medidas que ya les he nombrado, pero el compromiso es hacer seguimiento a esos planes de acción, porque jugar con las expectativas, cuando estamos hablando de transparencia, también es una ola que se nos puede devolver. Y por último, perderle el miedo a los códigos de ética, perderle el miedo a la ley de lobby, perderle el miedo a legislar con sanciones, perderle el miedo a promover las denuncias. Porque si seguimos legislando con penas blandas, si seguimos legislando con miedo, al final del día estamos legislando pensando en que vamos a ser corruptos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Paulina. It's very interesting also to hear all the various plans that Chile has gone through to, that it's not just a one-stop makes it work. You have to go and keep revolving and keep changing and keep improving, which is a lesson for all of us. Thank you. I would like now to turn to Tamar Nedzar, who is the senior counsel in the U.S. House Ethics Committee since 2011. Before that, she served as a counsel for the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission, and I know has done a lot of important, extensive work, particularly on issues related to an advisory capacity to members of the House, training, and public sort of awareness around issues of conduct and ethics. So we look very much forward to this.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Tamar Nedzar. I'm senior counsel to the House Committee on Ethics for the U.S. House of Representatives. I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about the House's ethics program and how we think that it improves transparency and accountability. The House Ethics Committee has jurisdiction over members and staff Authority for the committee comes from the U.S. Constitution. The committee was first created in 1967, and our first code of conduct was enacted on July 12, 1968, so we just had a 60th anniversary. Before the committee's creation, discipline was carried out on an ad hoc basis. The Ethics Committee is uniquely bipartisan in the House. The committee is comprised of 10 members, 5 from each of the parties. The chairwoman or chairman and the ranking member jointly guide the committee. Unlike the committee's members, the staff, myself included, are nonpartisan. We do not participate in partisan politics, even in our personal lives. This separation is intended to assure the House members and staff we serve directly, as well as the public, of our impartiality. All advice is given by licensed attorneys and is confidential. Giving impartial, confidential advice helps encourage members to reach out to the Ethics Committee for guidance. In addition, advice from the committee provides a safe harbor to members who rely on our advice. The Ethics Committee serves 2 basic functions. First, the advice and education function provides prospective guidance, conducts ethics training, and assists with public disclosure requirements. This is the office in which I work. We have a separate office within the committee that serves the function of investigating allegations of wrongdoing. Separation between the advice and education side and investigations is key to encouraging people to seek advice before something happens. In the United States, ethics rules derive from a number of sources. The highest authority, of course, comes from our Constitution, which contains, among other things, rules governing the acceptance of gifts and honors from a foreign government. Federal law governs conflicts of interest, post-employment restrictions, permissible use of government resources, separation between government and campaign activity, and public financial disclosures, just to name a few. Votes on legislation creating these standards are public. Federal regulations are rules the executive branch creates to fill in the gaps in legislation. Some of the federal regulations applicable to our members include regulations under the Federal Election Commission Act and regulations under the Internal Revenue Code. Federal regulations also go through a public vetting process before adoption. House rules are a set of rules members of the House of Representatives vote on at the beginning of each Congress. This vote is public, and therefore the code of conduct itself and who does or does not support it is transparent. Although by rule much of the work of the Committee on Ethics is confidential, it is also required to adopt rules in an open public session at the beginning of each Congress. The committee's advice and education staff advise on the following, except for lobbying and campaign activity. Gifts and travel. The House gift rule is written in the negative. House members may not accept a gift unless an exception to the rule applies. These exceptions are part of the House rules that the members vote on at the beginning of each Congress. Some are based on statute, some are based on historical practice, and others are a direct result of activities that have compromised members in the past. We consider payment of travel expenses to be a gift as well. The committee has extensive regulations governing which private entities may pay for official travel and what activities the members can conduct while on that travel. There are also fairly robust public disclosure requirements for travel paid for by an outside source. Conflicts of interest. Members may not use their official government position for personal gain. Federal laws even limit how members may interact outside of their official government positions. And of course, federal law prohibits accepting bribes or illegal gratuities in return for taking an official action. Financial disclosure. The Ethics in Government Act of 1978 and the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act of 2012 create a transparent public financial disclosure framework for members. These public disclosures are intended to permit the public to see where members, their spouses, and even their dependent children have financial or other interests. This allows the public to determine whether they are comfortable with those interests and how they may intersect with official duties. Members must disclose, among other things, certain assets, liabilities, income, position, gifts, travel paid for by private source or foreign government, as well as many other categories. The Ethics Committee helps members determine how to fill out these reports, and we also certify their accuracy. Post-employment restrictions. A federal statute puts limits on members for 1 year after leaving the House. Members may not communicate with anyone in the legislative branch, House members or senators, seeking official action on behalf of anyone else. The U.S. Department of Justice enforces the statute, but the committee advises members on the restrictions. Functions of the official office. The Ethics Committee works in tandem with another House committee to help offices use government resources appropriately. There are limits on the types of correspondence that members can send on official letterhead, activities in which members may engage while on government time, and how offices may interact with outside entities. There are strict rules governing separation between governmental and political activities and resources. The Ethics Committee does not oversee lobbying disclosure or campaign finance. The Ethics Committee's ultimate goal is to protect the institution of the House of Representatives through a robust compliance program. Our outreach efforts include new member training, training staff on an annual basis, and daily fielding phone calls and emails. We also go to member and committee offices to have more in-depth conversations at their request. We have an open door policy, which we believe is a best practice to encourage consultation with the Ethics Committee before members take actions or make decisions. As mentioned, the advice we give is confidential. Maintaining that confidentiality is one of the components that we hope encourages more contact with the committee, and we would consider confidentiality itself to be a best practice as well. In addition to the confidential advice we provide, the committee issues broad, formal, and public guidance so that our clients, as well as the public, understand our rules and how to apply them. We believe this kind of transparency is yet another best practice. Our publications are available on our website, and I would be happy to share these resources with you during the conference. Finally, we believe that watchdog groups and a free press play an important role in an ethics program, and their oversight and reporting can increase public confidence in our members. Indeed, we believe that public office is itself a public trust. With that, I thank you for inviting me to participate, and I look forward to sharing and learning from you.
Thank you so much, Tamar. That was extremely interesting. In particular, again, as I mentioned at the outset, just often this impression that a code of conduct is all about policing as opposed to protecting, providing a safe space for people to get advice and confidentiality, and very interesting. Thanks, Tamar. I would like, last but not least, to turn over to Jacopo Leone from the Democratic Governance Team at OSCE ODIHR. This is, I think, a really nice way to sort of wrap up this panel, because Jacopo, who's been working on this issue forever, has been to Georgia several times, in fact, to work with the council here as well to draft the Code of Ethics, and can give us really a bird's eye view of some of the best practices and lessons learned from legislatures around the world. So with that, high expectations.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Hello, everyone. I would like to thank the Parliament of Georgia, Ms. Vice Chair, for the kind invitation today to contribute to this amazing panel and all the information that we already heard this morning. What I would try to do, I think, is to contextualize a little bit all the bits and pieces that we heard on the panel before me. I think we heard about how trust is very much connected with transparency, and how much these codes can actually bring back the trust and reconnect the people with the elected representative. We heard how these codes can help MPs in delivering their functions and actually support their work in addressing those dilemma situations in which they might find themselves during their mandates. We heard how there are different types of codes that can be adopted, different types of enforcement of codes that can be envisaged by different parliaments. And then we heard that there are a number of challenges out there that are still that need to be addressed and to find a credible answer to them. As you mentioned, as OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, we support parliaments of all the OSCE participating states. We have 57 participating states, so a very large number of them. I personally had the pleasure of engaging with at least 15 of these parliaments, supporting them in drafting and adopting these codes of conduct. For the reasons that we heard before, because there is a demand from the citizens for them, because there is a demand from the MPs to have more clarity about what they are supposed to do in their functions when they encounter some tricky situations. So what I will try to do is to give a bit of a comparative overview of what we are with the codes across the OSCE region, at least. I'm sorry that some of the countries represented here in the rooms are not actually part of the organization that I work for, but I was very pleased to hear the experience from Chile and also from other countries that are encouraging in a sense that they are seeing how to solve the same kind of problems and challenges when it comes to ethics in parliaments. So where do we stand? If we look at the numbers, and we heard how the US first adopted a code in 1968, they were the first ones. Since then, I think we went a long way. What we have now across the 57 participating states of the OSCE, we have 28 codes adopted by 28 national parliaments. What is more interesting, I think, is the fact that out of these 28, 15 have been adopted in the last 10 years. So there is a trend, there is a clear trend growing in the number of parliaments that are seeing these instruments and tools as important, as useful. There is also an understanding that the international community is asking for them. You mentioned the OSCE-PA resolution. There is the Greco reports that were mentioned by my colleague before, the work of other international bodies that are demanding parliaments to adopt such tools. So that also comes into play. But what I think is there, and it's undeniable, is the fact that the citizens are asking for such tools. Maybe they're not asking them in the form of parliamentarians, why don't you adopt a code of conduct? They don't have this understanding maybe of the tool itself. But what they're asking is to have an increased transparency. They are asking to be included in the decision-making process, to have access to the data and the process itself. All things that we are here at the OGP to discuss and to talk about. This morning we mentioned the irreversible trend and process of the OGP. Looking at what's happening in Europe and in some countries with some fundamental values of democracy, I would be careful in saying that something is irreversible nowadays, I'm afraid. But what I think it's irreversible is the demand from the people to have these standards respected by the institutions. So that demand is not going to go away. And I think parliaments and more parliaments will adopt instruments like codes of conduct in the future. But is that enough? I think it's the time after 10 years or so, we said 10 years has been the time in which most codes have been adopted. Now maybe it's the time to try to assess if these codes are working. Are they working? Are they delivering what they're supposed to deliver? On some kind of level, it's a bit too early, because for some parliaments we are talking about an implementation period of few years. So obviously we need a little bit more time to understand and to assess if these codes are actually working. And on the other side, these are extremely complex processes. As you said, I've been lucky enough to be involved in the process here in Georgia, and we see, as from other experiences, that it's a very political process. It's very difficult to get there. So also answering a question, are these codes working, is not so easy as it might seem. And this is a kind of a positive approach to the question. Sometimes doing the work that I personally do, you get a bit discouraged, and you tend to say, no, they're not working, but that's not the old story. So what I will try to do is to point out 3 challenges that I think are the main ones that we still need to face. We still need to find the courage to address in a credible way. The first one has to do with the enforcement of these codes. There is no way around it. You can have a beautiful code that has all the legislation in place, requirements on conflict of interest, asset declarations, lobbying, post-employment, revolving doors, gender and conduct in chamber. If you don't have a strong enforcement mechanism with credible sanctions attached to it, it's not going to work. And we see this in some countries that have been adopting codes in the recent 10 years. they're beautiful. If you read them, you're very inspired, but then nobody's following them because there is nobody within the parliament that is responsible to enforce the code. This comes, as I was saying, with sanctions. There needs to be a level of sanctioning for those MPs that are actually breaching the code. Otherwise, it's a dead piece of paper. There are parliaments that are looking towards soft sanctions framework. Other parliaments are looking into more hard sanction frameworks. There is no perfect model also in this sense. Every parliament, each and every one, has to assess what is the right model for them to follow. But what I think we need to shy away from is the understanding of a code as a very weak word that we can just use to give to civil society, in a sense that then you can monitor my conduct as an MP, and then you can, write a very nasty article on a newspaper, and that will be enough. That's not enough. If you want the code to be respected, you need to have a minimum level of sanctioning attached to it. And this is the first challenge that we need to face. The second one, I think we need to remind ourselves, and this was mentioned before in the previous presentations, is the fact that a code cannot solve everything, because a code is just an instrument that brings together other pieces of legislation. So if you do not have a strong law on conflict of interest, if you do not have a strong law on lobbying or on declaration of assets, a code is not going to solve it for you. So you need to have a strong legislative framework in place in the first instance, and then you can use a code as a one-stop shop where you can refer to all these pieces of legislation to make the life of an MP a little bit easier in understanding where are the requirements that he or she has to follow. And the third point, I was very pleased to be preceded by the presentation from the US, because my third point is that we need to understand these tools, these codes, as educational frameworks. If we do that, then they will be successful. If we understand codes of conduct and similar instruments as a punishment, as you were saying before, that's really not even half of the story. The really added value of a code of conduct is the educational system that can be and has to be attached to it. And I think the US is probably the most shining experience in this regard, because they managed to create around the code, around a piece of paper that it's usually 5 pages and no more, even less sometimes. They managed to create around it a system, an educational system that is trying to change the integrity culture within the parliament. So this is what has to be done with the codes. It needs to be attached with trainings. It needs to be explained to the people outside and inside the parliament. It has to be kept as a flexible instrument, because the understanding of what its integrity, of what its ethical behavior, what its moral in politics is changing all the time. So the codes need to be flexible enough to have this to have this conversation within the parliament among MPs on what is the right conduct to have in a specific situation. Everybody, I think, will remember the case of France during the last presidential elections, and the scandal that was attached to Fillon with the use of parliamentary resources to pay for services from his wife and son. I think that's a very good example, because there was no rule that was impeding that kind of behavior in France at that point. But for the people, that was an unacceptable conduct by an elected MP. So that's how these norms are changing all the time, and that's how these codes need to be seen and as educational framework, as I was saying, able to adjust to how the conceptualization of morality is changing in society. So these are the three main challenges that I wanted to mention, and I think if we do manage to solve these issues, then codes and similar tools will really help in regaining that trust in citizens. And what I think they can also do is to give parliaments a central role again. What we see across the OSCE region is executives that are growing in their overcoming towards the legislative power. We need to re-put parliaments at the center of our democratic societies. And I think if we manage to do that, then we will manage also to bring politics back as a contest of ideas rather than frustrations. So if you bring the discussion and the dialogue back into parliament, where the actual salt is finding compromises and debate, then we will manage to have a better politics as well as a whole. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. That is put it very nicely into context. I am not sure if we have time for question and answer. I know that we started a little bit late. 5 minutes. Okay. I won't abuse my position as moderator, even though I have quite a few questions, but I'd rather, for actually the first time today, to give an opportunity to the participants if they have any questions for the panelists on this subject. Please raise your hand. No one? Yeah, please. Can we get a microphone? Oh, press the button there. Yeah.
Hello. All protocols observed. I'm Kende Olubayo from Nigeria. My question is on the parliamentarian, and we're talking of openness. First of all, most of the country who have spoken brilliantly about the openness, about the innovation in their parliament. First, I want to know, are such parliamentarians on part-time or full-time basis? First. Second one, if they're on full-time basis, do they add other extra activities like maybe creating projects for their own constituency, for their area, as part of the job of such a representative or a senator? I hope that second question is clear. Or should I repeat it?
So if I understood you correctly, the first was whether MPs or representatives were part-time or full-time, and then the second was whether or not they had a responsibility to build up projects in their constituencies?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Maybe we'll take one more question and then turn back. Please, gentlemen in the far row there.
Sorry. My question here is, I'm impressed about what I've seen here, and I believe I can take this to my country. I am Mohamed Samuel Kamara from Sierra Leone, the CEO and owner of Victory Teens organization. I also work as a presidential chaplain in Sierra Leone. What I have actually gathered here is about transparency and accountability. And this is one thing I believe we are lacking in Africa, in my country to be specific. Now, according to what I have learned here and what I have gathered here, how can I take this to my country? How can I build it up so that my government can embrace it? Because I believe we are representing the people. So how will this act in my own case? So I really want you to assist me in this particular entry. So whereas I can bring this to our own particular country and let my government know that this is it and this is what we want to do. And I want to be an ambassador for this particular program in my country because I think I am inspired and I am very enthusiastic about this particular thing of what I have gotten here. So my question is, how can we be involved from Sierra Leone? Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm glad that this was inspiring. So I will turn over to the panelists. Tamar, do you want to take a first stab at those things? Thank you.
Sure. First of all, about the question on part-time versus full-time job. In our case, this is a full-time job, and we have very clear restrictions to occupy any other paid job. This is very clear in our legislation, and parliamentarians, once elected, have to resign for any other job that we have immediately. Actually, we have very limited time to give up any other paid job. The only exception is educational and scientific activities. We can be professors, we can be teachers, we can be scientific researchers, but that's it. Everything beyond is very limited. And these regulations are, of course, coming first of all from the concept of conflict of interest, because once being an elected member of the parliament, you give up for 4 years everything else, and you dedicate yourself to the parliamentary work and to being a representative, which is elected by citizens. As for the obligations of building the projects in our constituency, what obligation we have is to communicate with our constituency, to have permanent meetings. That number of meetings needs to be, according to our rules of procedure, has to be registered, calculated, so reported to the parliament, which parliamentarian conducts which number of meetings, where, with whom. For the mandate of the parliamentarian, of course, we cannot go beyond the mandate of the parliamentarian. We can provide legislative function, faction. We can provide oversight function, of course, but we cannot go and build something somewhere. This kind of projects cannot be implemented. But other than that, everything that is not prohibited by legislation, members of the parliament are allowed to do. But as I mentioned, occupying any other paid job and including serving as an top or any managerial position in the companies and corporations is very much restricted. And members of the parliament have to be creative about the ways how they meet the requests and requests from the voters. Challenge in our case is that, and probably if we have a minute, I would talk about that. The challenge in our case is that oftentimes the constituency, our voters are reaching out to us not only matters that are specifically the matter of the legislator, so that are in mandate of the legislator. In many cases, including myself, as well as have heard that from the colleagues, is that citizens are reaching out on some matters that are more relevant to executive branch or the local municipalities, and the members of the parliament are trying to be a bridge in those kind of cases and help the citizens to communicate with the relevant institutions or the relevant officials who can be more useful in implementing the very concrete particular projects within the communities. Thank you.
Muy similar. Nosotros también tenemos el ejercicio de nuestros cargos en forma completa, tiempo completo. Por ejemplo, yo soy abogada de profesión y no puedo tener una oficina para prestar asesorías legales. Y en la declaración de patrimonios y de intereses, sobre todo, también hoy día queda más riguroso el hecho de que no puedo tener participación en alguna empresa, en alguna sociedad o incluso hasta familiares. Por ejemplo, si un parlamentario quiere incluso ir a la elección de alcalde en un municipio, tampoco puede renunciar a su cargo. Tiene que terminar el periodo de parlamentario para luego planificar hacia adelante si quiere postular a algún otro cargo. No puede renunciar. Y yo digo que el trabajo del Parlamento o del parlamentario es 24/7. Uno legisla, en nuestro caso en Chile, de lunes a jueves y luego de jueves a el fin de semana estás en las zonas que representas. Chile tiene 15 regiones y el Congreso está al centro del país. Luego de eso, cada uno tiene que en general tomar un avión para poder llegar hasta la zona que representa. Por lo tanto, no es solo una cuestión de ética o de evitar conflictos de intereses, sino que de calidad del trabajo, dedicarse exclusivamente a lo que la ciudadanía te ha escogido.
Yeah, I can give a brief answer. One third of our parliamentarians are doing this work full-time. 2/3 of our parliamentarians, they have a part-time job beside this. Coming from the public sector, you are not allowed to continue to do your job full-time. There are restrictions. But if you wanted to be re-elected, then you have no chance to do a full-time job beside this. So we have some parliamentarians for one session. They continue as a lawyer or like this, but then they have no chance to be re-elected. And you are not allowed to implement projects in your constituency, for example, which are supported in which public money is involved. That's not possible.
Members of the House of Representatives serve on a full-time basis. They may have outside employment, but they are restricted in two ways. First, they may not serve as a fiduciary for compensation, so if they're an attorney or a doctor, they cannot receive income. The second is if they are allowed to receive income from another job, they're limited in the amount per calendar year. As far as projects for their district, earmarks are no longer allowed in the House, so you can't create projects that are specifically meant to help an interest in your district. However, if corn is the biggest product that comes from your district, you might work on corn legislation, and that could have a tangential effect on your district without being an earmark per se. For the gentleman who was inspired today, that's great to hear. There are a lot of resources online. Codes of conduct from countries are available pretty much across the board. There's a very supportive community, so please use the resources that you have here and make some contacts, and let's see if we can make you the point person for your country.
Thank you, Tamar. Actually, I was just going to say that hopefully in the closing remarks, we'll also be sharing some of the information. For example, the presentations. We have different websites through the OGP committee that are filled with documents and different, not just from this panel, but others as well. Yes, please.
Muy breve, pero me parece importante. Creo que es importante la dedicación exclusiva. Incluso en Chile, si un candidato en la elección, previo a la elección, gana su elección y tiene participación en algunas empresas o tiene un patrimonio importante, al momento de asumir su cargo, en base a la ley del fideicomiso ciego, tiene que entregar la administración de sus bienes a un tercero, que en general es una sociedad. O sea, no solo invito a que se avance en la dedicación exclusiva, sino que se entregue la administración de sus bienes, de su patrimonio, para evitar el conflicto de intereses una vez que se asuma el cargo.
Thank you for that. I do think there are still some legislatures that do have allotted so-called pork money for constituent projects. But so I think it probably varies from country to country. We have exhausted our time. I'm getting looks. But this was a very fruitful discussion. Thank you to this esteemed panel for your interventions and thought-provoking ideas. Of course, I also have to thank the Parliament of Georgia for hosting this event, along with the various partners that put this together. And we will move on to the next lightning round, I guess. Thank you very much. Round of applause, please, for the panelists.
honorable members of parliaments, dear partners in OGP. This photo you can see on the screen now was taken for the publication prepared by e-Governance Academy, entitled E-Estonia, E-Governance in Practice. It illustrates the text about internet voting, and the fact that I am depicted in this photo is not by chance. Indeed, I am a devoted e-voter from the very beginning, when this voting channel became available for Estonian citizens in 2005. But even more importantly, I was a member of parliament when basic laws were approved making internet voting possible. In this photo, you can also see Estonian ID card, which carries my digital identity. Now it is installed also in my mobile phone. I still remember the debates in Parliament when the draft law for digital identity was initiated in 2001. What does digital identity mean? Who would need it? Is it justified spending taxpayers' money for something we can't fully explain the outcome of? We took the risk and voted for innovation. Now Estonian society is picking up the fruits of that bold legislative decision. We can use all public and not only public services online seamlessly. No need to carry documents from one office to another and wait in queue to get things done. More and more voters prefer to vote via internet. During last year's local elections, 1/3 of voters used internet voting. I brought this Estonian example in order to highlight the importance of parliaments for innovation. The question to think about together is how to develop the capacity of Parliament to meet new challenges and opportunities that digital revolution brings us. First and foremost, we should think about democracy now and in future. The fact is that in several democratic countries, there is a growing mistrust towards the institutions of representative democracy. It seems that in addition to other factors, the current policy-making process does not satisfy expectations of digital citizens. I can say this relying on my own experience. The matter is the traditional role of parliaments and MPs, listening citizens' concerns and finding solutions, is no longer silently respected by active people. They want more dialogue and direct individual engagement in decision-making. I stress individual, since the current model of citizen engagement prefers organized interests and advocacy groups. Of course, organized civil society is of great importance for democracy, but at the same time, internet allows us to harness the wisdom of the crowd or collective intelligence. The method is called crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing means that the initiator of the process, be it parliament or government or even citizen organization, invites all who are interested to contribute to achievement of predefined common goal. Thanks to rapidly growing connectivity, it is now easier than ever to mobilize citizens to take part in policy making, which task is exactly to find out the common goal called public interest. 5 years ago, when we had some kind of political crisis in Estonia, we used crowdsourcing to find out new ideas how to rectify, how to improve democracy in Estonia. We opened the online platform for 1 month and gathered more than 1,300 different proposals, what need to be done with regulations on Estonian political party system and also public participation in policy-making process. Finally, a random sample of Estonian citizens was gathered to find out which ideas are so good that should be presented to the parliament. And President, as a supporter of this initiative, actually took this package to the parliaments. I have to admit that I was somewhat concerned about how Parliament will react to the new situation created by this crowdsourcing mechanism. In media, some MPs expressed a negative attitude to this kind of citizens' initiative, arguing that this is not foreseen by Constitution. However, Parliament took proposals in proceedings and implemented part of the package. So far, there is no agreement in Estonian media whether Parliament was adequately met the needs of and proposals of people or not. Particularly, I am satisfied. On the crowdsourcing platform, I presented an idea to introduce collective citizen memoranda to the Parliament as a legal instrument. The aim was to facilitate citizen participation in policy making between elections and to encourage citizen parliament dialogue. This proposal became a law. For submission of collective proposal, at least 1,000 signatures should be collected. Signature may be given by a permanent resident of Estonia who is at least 16 years old. Please notice that citizenship is not a decisive factor, and also young people can take part in petition process. As appropriate in electronic state, we can prepare petitions and collect signatures online. By the way, the platform was opened 2 years ago as one of the commitments of Estonian OGP action plan. The implementer of the activity was Estonian Cooperation Assembly, an NGO initially founded by President of a Republic. I imagine that you are interested in what has happened with citizens' initiatives in the Parliament. Altogether, Parliament has received, during 4 years period, 32 proposals. Proceedings have been finalized for 30 of them. According to rules of procedure, Parliament have several options how to resolve the citizens' proposal. Only 2 cases law has been amended. It may be seen as unsatisfactory outcome. However, passing law is not an aim by itself. From my opinion, dialogue and deliberation means as well, especially on thorny issues citizens like to raise. Dear parliamentarians, civil society activists, time has come to renew democracy and make citizens real partners in policy making. Please vote for innovation of democracy. Thank you.
Audio Jungle.
Is it on?
I think so. Not yet.
Is it on?
Oh, wait. Now it's on. Is yours on?
Now it's on.
Wonderful.
Okay. No matter what it says in your program, I'm the real Nora Dempsey.
And no matter what it says in your program, I am the real Bridget Roddy.
And no matter what it's going to say up there. Okay.
Okay. So the question is, who does the work of government?
And the answer is people like you. So legislators, people who work in legislation, parliamentarians, real people, policymakers.
And civil servants like me.
And diplomats like me. And now, in every field, in federal government agencies across the United States, one more group is making a difference.
Students.
Bridget, you know, they told us we only have 5 minutes. So should we explain it in fives?
Sure, let's count up.
Okay. So less than 1 decade ago, it began with just one idea.
And that one idea, plus the two of us,
and 3 separate attempts to build a website on open source software,
turned into the largest virtual internship program in the world, offering a way forward for U.S. government offices struggling to keep up with the demands of technology.
and opening the door to 5,000 students happy to help their own country and glad of the opportunity to work alongside a government employee while learning something new at the same time.
That one idea was the Virtual Student Federal Service, VSFS. In 9 years, we've grown from just 40 students working with the U.S. Department of State, our foreign ministry, to 5,000 students competing for 1,500 positions across 60 federal agencies.
Students studying engineering, astronomy, information technology, graphic design, economics, history, Chinese, zoology, apply to VSFS on the usajobs.gov website. They're allowed to pick 3 projects, and they can write a personal statement in which they tell the mentors why they're the best one for the job.
And then in August, the offices that said they needed help review their applicants, interview, and pick the students they want to work with.
And in September, the work begins.
Students work about 10 hours a week from September through May. Some students can gain university credit, and all students gain valuable experience.
And now that we have the website built and almost all the kinks out,
we are almost ready to share the code, and that's why we are here.
We want to partner with one of you to
create,
take the next step forward.
And to create a virtual student federal service of your own.
It's a really beautiful way to welcome the energy and the technical excellence of the next generation.
So Nora, should we give these parliamentarians some concrete examples of how college students working remotely can help them with their work?
Sure. Why not? So, one thing our congressmen have appreciated is help with data visualization. One intern worked for the Centers for Disease Control. She did an amazing job transforming the health data and the CDC and the data that the CDC collects into infographics that American citizens can understand.
Agreed. And don't forget all the interns doing research. There was one project that was particularly successful. A student unearthed some important historical information for the U.S. National Archives 2 years ago. It was amazing work.
I remember. Yeah. And social media. Before we go on, we better mention social media. I'm always impressed by the social media interns we have. Those of us over 40 may not be able to keep up with the trends on Twitter and Facebook, but interns are on the cutting edge. This past year, 3 interns worked remotely for the America House in Ukraine to develop a social media presence. The internship really paid off, so views on the America House website tripled by the end of the academic year.
And I bet some of you will need help with writing policy papers, like our legislators do. Using social media skills, an intern worked with the Indian Health Service to improve health outcomes for one of the U.S. minority populations, American Indians and Alaska Natives. He wrote for and edited their blog and improved their health fact sheets.
And finally, we should mention geographic information systems. In the U.S., we have 58 national parks. This year alone, several environmental science students helped to conserve new habitats in one of our states, in Delaware, using their skills in geographic information systems. Their work mapped the area in more detail than has ever been done before and allowed for the charting of invasive species growth in that area.
So, we hope you can see why a virtual internship program is a great idea.
I think they've got the picture, Bridget.
But just to make sure, how about we count down the top 5 reasons why a virtual internship corps is a great idea for any country?
Oh, okay. Well, to start with, I think you have to remember the speed of technology. I'd say the 5th most important reason to work transparently with virtual interns is to make sure that your government offices and officers take advantage of in terms of technology. So spreadsheets, Google Docs, data visualization, Tableau, Excel, Skype, Zoom.
And I'd say the 4th most convincing reason is the sheer number of university students who are digital natives and have the skills to help government.
And 3rd, I think we have to talk about percentages. Of the 20 or so countries represented here, between 15 and 19% of your populations are of university age. University students with fresh perspectives and who are actually looking for a chance to do some real work.
And in 2nd place, I'd say, or we'd say, is transparency. I mean, that's what OGP is all about, after all.
And finally, in 1st place, the number 1 reason to welcome digital interns into your workplace is to let them do their share. Let them do the work. Take a break. Go home at a reasonable hour. So, which one of you wants in? Who wants to give this a try? Contact us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
The first thing I'd like to say, I never liked that picture. I look much better in real life. So I'll be tapping into this conversation with a more Georgian perspective. So I myself represent TI Georgia. My name is George. And I've been very active in the civil society sector for a handful of years now. And I can freely state that the degree of responsibility and difficulty in communicating information to the general public in a fluid and effective manner has grown exponentially throughout the years. Just for an example, if 5 to 10 years ago we thought that we could publish 30 to 50 pages reports and expect people to actually read them, nowadays people have much higher standards and they expect much more from us. For example, research actually shows that there's a direct negative correlation between the volume of available information and the attention span of a regular human being. So the more information it is open in the internet era, the less likely someone is going to be less selective and less picky. So they're not necessarily going to stick with your source. So how do we combat this? There are 3 ways. Number 1, using simplified human language. So connecting to the person at an individual level. There's absolutely no reason to use complicated language when communicating with regular citizens. Number 2 is the accessibility. People should not take 5 to 10 minutes to understand where to get your information or how to use your platform. And number 3, in case of citizen engagement platforms, is of course maximum user friendliness. And these are critical points to take into account for countries that have a very specific historical past, such as Georgia. For all of you who have watched Lord of the Rings, you will recognize what this picture is trying to say. So under the Soviet regime, everything was centralized. There was no functioning civil society, and citizens had zero input in the process of government decision-making. In fact, they were discouraged from participating and meddling in the affairs of the state. So it's not a surprise that even today, in the absence of strong political traditions, there is a very low degree of trust in two-way communication channels between governments, parliaments, and citizens, and even towards citizen engagement platforms that CSOs create. And I can bring one example. Last year, an online petition platform launched, iChange.gov, and this platform allowed any citizen of Georgia to write a petition online, and if they gathered a certain threshold of signatures, then this petition would be sent over to the government for deliberation. And as soon as this platform launched, I told some of my friends who are animal activists and who also work on environmental issues if they had any ideas they'd like to write a petition on, and they said, yeah, sure, we have so many ideas. And then I asked them, are you actually going to use the platform? And they said, no. What's the point? It's not like we are going to get those 10,000 votes that's required. It's not like anybody is actually going to deliberate on them. So we are having a huge critical point here, is that there is a very low degree of trust. And this brings me to what researchers call the Circle of Mistrust. So on one hand, we have low public trust, which means people have absolutely no confidence in what you're offering them, which translates to lack of use. So if people do not believe in the information or in the product that you're offering them, they're not going to use it. And it goes on an infinite loop, because then there's no other people's success stories, and it reinforces everyone's beliefs that it's all just a mere formality. And one of the remedies on how you can communicate information in a more fluent manner, as well as build more engaging citizen engagement platforms, is using simple language. And this brings me to one quote by a very well-known physicist, Ronald Feynman. He worked on issues that regular people like me cannot understand. In fact, he worked on quantum electrodynamics. And in fact, in light of this, he said that no matter how difficult the information is that you're trying to communicate, always keep it as simple as possible. So simple, in fact, that you could show it to a 13-year-old, and the 13-year-old would understand what your point is. And now I just lost my point, and it's good that I'm keeping it simple. So what Feynman was actually trying to say here, the way I interpret his message, is that if you're forcing yourself to write an idea from start to finish in a language that a child can understand, then you're forcing yourself to understand the concept at a much deeper level. And if you're stuck somewhere in the process, that's okay, because then you know where are the gaps, and it gives you an opportunity to improve and learn. And Feynman actually predicted the future of the whole CSO landscape. If you look at how successful CSOs and government agencies operate today, you will find that they make extensive use of infographics, they make extensive use of visualizations, they use extensive use of simple targeted messages at the individual level. And what's also important to keep in mind is that research shows that a person has up to 4 to 5 different tabs open in a browser, and I actually have a colleague that has up to 25 at any given day, which is crazy. And a person is also less likely to spend more than 5 seconds, just 5 seconds, deciding whether or not they want to continue reading your information or whether or not they want to continue using your platform. And it's a very hard cycle to break, in fact. So this is something that we keep in mind whenever we try to communicate information at TI Georgia or whenever we are trying to build platforms. I know I don't have much time, so I'll just give an example of our parliamentary monitoring website, which is MyParliament.g. This site basically allows all citizens access to information about the activities of the MPs, about the legislature, about the lawmaking process, so on and so henceforth. But what makes this different is that the information provided there is very simple, is that we use extensive visualizations, we use charts, so people see this very eye-candy pictures and they want to stay on the site. And this has proven to work. And one of the features that we offer to citizens is an SMS subscription system. So any citizen, for free of charge, without actually having to go through 5 minutes of registration, can just put in their number into this field, choose the committees in which the activities they're interested in, And whenever there's an important update related to the work of any of these committees, they will get an SMS. But this SMS won't be in complex language. It will be simple, human-targeted language. So it will tell the user what's being discussed, when it's being discussed, and why it's important to them. So as to summarize my main points, overcomplicating things is not necessarily the best way to go at it. Always use simple, human-targeted language. Communicate with people at an individual level. And once you do that, you will see that magic happens. Thank you very much.
Great. So my name is Scott Hubley. I'm Director of Governance Programs from NDI in Washington. I've been asked to say just a few closing words at the end of today's session. And of course, I have to start out by thanking again the Parliament of Georgia for hosting this event, but also for their leadership on this issue internationally. They've been there since the beginning and have made a commitment to this field that really has had an impact. I want to do three quick things by way of closing. First, just say a few words about where we've come from, where we need to go, and then how we can perhaps help in getting you there. So in terms of where we've come from, I think it's worth recognizing or remembering how new this field is. The Declaration on Legislative Openness was launched in 2012 at the Chamber of Deputies in Rome. Based on that work, a legislative openness working group was formed in 2013. NDI had the great pleasure of co-chairing that together with the bicameral commission in Chile. Senator Larraín, who's now serving as a Minister of Justice, played a very important role in moving this forward. But at the time, in 2013, the questions were really, should parliaments be engaged in this at all? Wouldn't engaging parliaments make this too political? So it's really only been in 5 years that there's been parliamentary engagement in OGP. And in that time, it's worth remembering how much has happened. First of all, that Declaration on Parliamentary Openness, it's kind of become a reference document endorsed by 185 organizations from 85 countries. In Latin America, you have an extremely strong regional network on parliamentary openness. You've heard from Senator Blanca Olivar earlier, but Parlamericas has done great work on this in the region. There's now clear guidance within OGP about how parliaments can do an open parliament action plan. That didn't exist until relatively recently. And there's now support staff within OGP to support this work and a variety of toolkits and the like. In many regions, particularly Latin America, kind of having an open parliament engagement or action plan has become more of the norm than the exception, and this work is expanding. On the civil society side, there's a greater number of partners on this work, and the list of menu options for parliaments to choose from and the sources of expertise has expanded enormously. More than anything, I think in many countries, you're seeing what used to be a very conflictual relationship between civil society and parliament begin to be a more cooperative engagement where they're actually sitting down together to co-create parliamentary reform. So there's a lot to be proud of in this movement in only 5 years. That said, there's a lot of challenges going forward, and the urgency that they need to be addressed is perhaps greater than ever. Democracy is being challenged in new ways. Populism's on the rise. Tech tools that have the opportunity to engage citizens are also being weaponized and used for things like disinformation and are fueling hyperpartisanship and extremist views in many parliaments. Citizen expectations, as was noted, is evolving rapidly as well, and I think parliaments are having a difficult time keeping up. While there are a growing number of parliamentary commitments, if those commitments remain commitments and aren't acted on, there's a risk of further alienation of citizens. We don't want parliaments to engage in transparency washing. And so, as Jacopo mentioned in the last panel, we need not just codes of conduct, but sanctions to ensure that they're implemented. There are many parliaments that are in OGP member countries that are still not engaged, so there's still outreach to be done, and I think an opportunity for parliaments to do more in overseeing government action plans. So there's a huge agenda ahead of this community as well. I want to just touch base on one mechanism for moving this forward, and I'm not sure if there's a parliamentary slide of the open network that can be put up. But there is, as many of you know, within OGP, the working groups across all of OGP were sunset at the end of last year. To continue to support this work, a consortium has been formed of parliamentary support organizations to help support this work going forward. The organizations include NDI, the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, Parlaméricas, OSCE, and we're working, as well as Directorio Legislativo, and we're working with UNDP as well in many contexts. There's a Parliamentary Leadership Council for that, and you've heard from many of the members of that during the program today. This consortium can help in supporting peer-to-peer exchanges and also tap into the broader parliamentary openness community. So if any of the things that you've heard of in this session today are of interest, there is a community of support for you to take that forward, both within the development community and within the support unit. So I'll just close with a thought, because I think we've heard a lot about how big the challenges are in front of parliaments in adapting to rising citizen expectations and technology. Our chairman at NDI, Madeleine Albright, just came out with a book called Fascism, A Warning. And she's been asked a lot about whether she's optimistic about democracy or pessimistic. And her answer is always that she's an optimist who worries a lot. And I think that's about right for where we are as a community. I think there's cause for concern, but there's also, I think, reason for a lot of optimism. To some extent, the values of OGP are hardwired into people. People want to have a say in how they're governed. People don't want corruption. People don't want presidents for life. The values that OGP has, I think, are hardwired into all of us. And so the task ahead of us is just how do we realize those values? And it's heartening for me to see this growing community that is working on these issues, and the challenge is how do we work together to move this agenda forward faster. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. So I'm not sure many of you know me, as Westminster Foundation for Democracy is relatively new in the world of open government partnership. My name is Devin O'Shaughnessy, the Director of Programs at Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Firstly, I'd like to second Scott's congratulations to the Georgian Parliament for hosting a brilliant day. The wide range of speakers and participants is testimony to Georgia's ability to host these kind of events, and to the Parliament's engagement, their International Relations Department, which we actually have had the privilege of helping support as Westminster Foundation for Democracy. We've worked with the Georgian Parliament for about a decade now with committees on human rights, environmental protection, sharing primarily the British experience. We're one of just many actors supporting this Parliament, but I think it's just important to note, as a relative newcomer to engaging Georgia myself, I've been impressed completely with the progressiveness of this Parliament, especially on the area of OGP. Now, all the sessions today, highlighted to me not only that there's an understanding of the need for parliaments to play a critical role in OGP, but I felt a real passion for it. There's a reason we all came together and helped organize a specific day for the role of parliaments in OGP, because people really care about it and they feel it's an important pillar of OGP. Some of the parliaments that you heard from today, very excited about Canada and its goals for this year, obviously Georgia, but also Serbia, and one of the partners we work with very closely, the Parliament of Morocco, spoke also about their engagement on this issue. So the passion is there, and now it's up to us to help take it forward. Unfortunately, there has been somewhat of a growing momentum from international donors away from directly engaging and supporting parliaments, perhaps because they're a little slow in making decisions, they're highly political entities, and sometimes results can be difficult to measure. But as an organization that's deeply committed to partnering with parliaments, facilitating the sharing of experiences, not only with the UK, but building alliances and sharing experiences amongst the 30 partner parliaments that we work with, I truly feel passionate about the potential of parliaments, in part using OGP to engage all citizens, build greater trust in their democratic systems, as an important arena for peaceful and meaningful debate in the countries, as well as obviously an important mechanism for holding government to account and generating new ideas in policy, and of course operating as a watchdog when necessary. So it was our passion for parliaments and the open invitation from the OGP community that WFD decided to become a member of the Open Network. Scott's already mentioned some of the organizations that are part, but we view this as a fantastic mechanism to support our partner parliaments in OGP and advance openness and transparency in general, and specifically inside the parliaments we work with. One of our primary donors, DFID, has really thrown a lot of weight recently into OGP and stressed that they believe parliaments play a critical role. So we are helping them deliver on that. Now, I think Open as a network is still developing how to work amongst each other, how to make decisions, how to divide up responsibilities. It's also an open network that we want to include new types of organizations. But what's most important is that there's a really positive spirit of collaboration amongst the members of the network. There's going to be a lot of mutual learning, working together, and I think that sending that positive message of collaboration is critical. I'll just briefly say that WFD's plans in OGP, important because I don't think many know us that well. At the global level, we obviously want to advocate very strongly for the role of parliaments in OGP. We believe that currently, to some degree, it's almost like a two-legged stool between government and civil society. But in reality, we view it as parliaments forming the third leg of a stool in order to ensure that all views of people, and that it's a fully collaborative and comprehensive process for engaging the citizenry. And if parliaments aren't playing the strong role that they could play, there's something missing. So we, at the global level, will obviously be part of Open, but we want to, utilizing our research capabilities, actually start to dig into the impact, particularly of parliaments and the role they've played in OGP. So that's going to be one of our major areas of focus. We hope to share the UK's experience in OGP as an actor unable to actually do things in the United Kingdom. That doesn't mean that we can't help share their experience, which is a standard approach that we use. And then, of course, we hope to work at the national level across the 30 countries in which we work. We're looking to 5 countries in particular, 2 of which asked questions earlier, Sierra Leone and Nigeria, to offer support for engagement in parliaments with OGP, but also Ghana, Kenya, and Pakistan. So finally, I'll just mention that there's a short video that's been produced on the accomplishments of the Georgian Parliament. So I think that'll be very exciting. So can we get that going?
ინფორმაციაზე ხელმისაწვდომობა, ახალი ტექნოლოგიების დანერგვა, ანგარიშვალდებულება და გადაწყვეტილების მიღების პროცესში მოქალაქეთა ჩართულობის უზრუნველყოფა ღია მმართველობის პარტნიორობის მთავარი პრინციპებია. ღია მმართველობის პარტნიორობა 2011 წელს დაფუძნებული გლობალური ინიციატივაა, რომელიც დღეს 70-ზე მეტ ქვეყანას აერთიანებს. საქართველო იყო ერთ-ერთი პირველი ქვეყანა, რომელიც შეუერთდა ამ გლობალურ ინიციატივას და განახორციელა მნიშვნელოვანი რეფორმები მმართველობის სფეროში, მათ შორის საკანონმდებლო ღიაობის კუთხით. მიღწეული შედეგების აღიარების ნიშნად 2017 წლის 19 სექტემბერს საქართველო 1 წლის ვადით OGP-ს თავმჯდომარე ქვეყნად იქნა არჩეული.
საქართველოს პარლამენტი იყო ერთ-ერთი, რომელმაც 2015 წელს ხელი მოაწერა საკანონმდებლო ღიაობის დეკლარაციას და მით შეუერთდა ამ გლობალურ ინიციატივას. საზოგადოებას აქვს სურვილი და უფლება ჰქონდეს მაქსიმალური ინფორმაცია პარლამენტის საქმიანობის, ხელისუფლების საქმიანობის შესახებ და ჩვენ მოხარული ვართ, რომ საქართველოს პარლამენტი ამ კუთხით არის მაგალითის მივცემი ხელისუფლების სხვა ორგანოებისათვის. პარლამენტი ახორციელებს უმნიშვნელოვანეს რეფორმებს იმისათვის, რომ პარლამენტი და ხელისუფლების სხვა ორგანოები იყვნენ მაქსიმალურად ღია ქართული საზოგადოებისათვის.
უკვე მეოთხე წელია საქართველოს პარლამენტი ღია მმართველობის პრინციპებზე დაყრდნობით ქმნის გარემოს, სადაც უმჯობესდება კომუნიკაცია ამ მრჩეველთან, მოქალაქეებთან, სადაც მტკიცდება პარლამენტის როლი მმართველობის სისტემაში და იზრდება საზოგადოების ნდობა საკანონმდებლო ხელისუფლების მიმართ.
2015 წლიდან დღემდე საკანონმდებლო ღიაობის პროცესებს პარლამენტში ღია მმართველობის მუდმივ მოქმედი საპარლამენტო საბჭო ხელმძღვანელობს. საბჭოს საქმიანობა პარლამენტის რეგლამენტით რეგულირდება, რაც მისი მდგრადობის გარანტია. საბჭოსთან არსებული ადგილობრივი და საერთაშორისო ორგანიზაციებით დაკომპლექტებული საკონსულტაციო ჯგუფი უზრუნველყოფს, რომ გადაწყვეტილების მიღების პროცესი თანამონაწილეობით პრინციპებზე იყოს დაფუძნებული. დღემდე საქართველოს პარლამენტმა 3 სამოქმედო გეგმა და 34 ვალდებულება დაამტკიცა და განახორციელა.
აღსანიშნავია წლების განმავლობაში საქართველოს სამოქალაქო სექტორი და საქართველოს პარლამენტის აქტიური თანამშრომლობა სამოქმედო გეგმის შემუშავების და განხორციელების პროცესში. ამ აქტიური თანამშრომლობისთვის საქართველოს პარლამენტმა 2015 წელს მექსიკაში გამართულ OGP-ს გლობალურ სამიტზე მიიღო ღია მმართველობის პარტნიორობის ჩემპიონის ჯილდო.
ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანი მგონია ეს ახალი ცვლილება, რომელიც მივიღეთ რეგლამენტში, რომლითაც პეტიციების განხილვის ახალი სტანდარტი არის შემოთავაზებული და კანონშემოქმედებით პროცესში იქნება უზრუნველყოფილი კანონის მიღების ყველა ეტაპზე მოქალაქეთა მაქსიმალური ჩართულობა, მათი მოსაზრებების მოსმენა და ეს არის ახალი ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანი სტანდარტი ღიაობის და ანგარიშვალდებულების კუთხით.
საკანონმდებლო ცვლილებების პარალელურად ღიაობის რეფორმა მიზნად ისახავს ინოვაციური ტექნოლოგიების გამოყენებით პარლამენტის საქმიანობის კიდევ უფრო გაუმჯობესებას. ამისათვის ჩვენ შევქმნით რიგი ონლაინ რესურსები, რომლებიც მოქალაქეებს საშუალებას აძლევს აქტიურად ჩაერთონ საკანონმდებლო და საზრდამხედველო საქმიანობაში. მომზადდა მობილური აპლიკაცია ჯეოპარლამენტი. პარლამენტის ვებგვერდს დაემატა საჯარო ინფორმაციის მოდული. შემუშავდა პარლამენტის ვებგვერდის ახალი კონცეფცია, რომელიც პარლამენტის საზოგადოებასთან კომუნიკაციას თვისობრივად ახალ ეტაპზე გადაიყვანს.
პარლამენტი ხალხთან ყველაზე ახლოს დგომი სახელმწიფო დაწესებულება, ვინაიდან ხალხი მას პირდაპირ წესით ირჩევს. ღია მმართველობა ემსახურება სწორედ იმას, რომ ადამიანებმა ზუსტად იცოდნენ, რა საქმიანობს პარლამენტი, გარდა ამისა, რითია დაკავებული თითოეული დეპუტატი. ანუ მნიშვნელოვანია, რომ პარლამენტი იყოს მაგალითი ყველა სახელმწიფო უწყებისთვის ღიაობის, გამჭვირვალობის და გარდა ამისა, რა თქმა უნდა, მოქალაქეებთან ახლოს დგომის და მათი პრობლემების გაზიარების და გადაწყვეტის.
ინფორმაცია საქართველოს პარლამენტის საქმიანობის და პარლამენტში არსებული სერვისების შესახებ, ისევე როგორც კანონშემოქმედებით პროცესში ჩართულობა, ხელმისაწვდომი უნდა იყოს ნებისმიერი დაინტერესებული პირისთვის, მათ შორის შეზღუდული შესაძლებლობის მქონე პირებისათვის. საქართველოს პარლამენტმა შეიმუშავა სპეციალური გეგმა თბილისის სასახლის რეკონსტრუქციის მიზნით, რაც უფრო ადაპტირებულს გახდის შეზღუდული შესაძლებლობის მქონე პირებისათვის ამ შენობას და სამუშაოებიც უახლოეს მომავალში დაიწყება. პარალელურად მიმდინარეობს ახალი ვებგვერდის შექმნა, რომელიც ადაპტირებული იქნება ყველა კატეგორიის შეზღუდული შესაძლებლობის მქონე პირებისათვის და პარლამენტის აპარატის თანამშრომლების გადამზადება იმისთვის, რომ ისინი მზად იყვნენ, ხელი შეუწყონ ნებისმიერ შეზღუდული შესაძლებლობის მქონე პირს, რომელიც სტუმრად ეწევა თბილისის სასახლეს.
საკანონმდებლო ღიაობის რეფორმების შედეგად მნიშვნელოვნად გაფართოვდა საჯარო ინფორმაციის პროაქტიულად გამოსაქვეყნებელ ინფორმაციათა ნუსხა. ეს და სხვა ინიციატივები საშუალებას აძლევს საზოგადოებრივ ორგანიზაციებს, მედიას და მოქალაქეებს მეტი გაიგონ პარლამენტის საქმიანობის შესახებ და შედეგად უფრო ეფექტურად აკონტროლონ ის.
Ladies and gentlemen, Open Parliament Day is over. Thank you for participation. You are very welcome to join the opening reception hosted by the Chairman of the Parliament of Georgia. Please proceed to the courtyard of the Parliament.